Oh, wonderful. And do we want to mute people and then people can unmute when it's their turn?
No.
No? Okay. Well, let's try it.
You want the background
Well,
noise?
it can be hard with noise, but let's just see. Oops, I think that is how it happened, maybe. Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is the third and final of our Pirkei Avot series. I'm really just delighted that we're meeting on this beautiful day. And it's the right season for Pirkei Avot because it is studied, as we know, all around the world in Jewish communities right now between Passover and Shavuot. So we are in it. We got a lot of partners. And we're going to start with our Torah prayer. Let's do it. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you to the source of all for the inspiration to be lifelong learners. Amen. We'll start by just a quick review of the context of what we're doing. We're looking at a chapter of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a part of the Talmud, the earliest part of the Talmud. And it comes from the few hundred years right around the birth of Jesus all the way to maybe, I guess, 200 CE when the Mishnah was codified. So this was an era of incredible transition, flux, change, because as we know, the destruction of the Second Temple took place in 70 CE, and the entire nature of Judaism had to be reinvented. And so the Mishnah is situated squarely in that reinvention process, which is really exciting because in many ways, I think we're in a period of reinvention of Judaism right now, from the whatever was before to whatever will be. And that probably will come up again. So we're going to that's big context there, and we're going to dive into some of the actual Mishnahs, and we're going to also make time for our own discussion of our own wisdom sayings. Joanne actually led the Shimano group a couple of weeks ago in a deep discussion of family wisdom sayings. It was really interesting. And I'm going to ask people who learned something from someone else's wisdom saying that day to report back in, but also we'll gather up some of our own. I collected some too. So in some ways, there's in this period when the Mishnah is being written, there is a culture shift happening. There's a power shift happening, and we're going to try to identify what that culture shift and power shift are all about. But we know that what we started with historically was a temple-based religion where animal sacrifice was the core of everything. That's how you were religious, was you would bring your best offerings, not just animals, your best plant offerings also. And you would do your 3 pilgrimages a year with your whole family to Jerusalem, to the temple. Everything was centered on that building. And it was all about offering up your best goods, your best animal, your best wheat. Right now we're in the barley harvest starts the Omer period, and the wheat harvest at Shavuot ends the Omer period. So it's very agriculturally rooted, very temple focused. And that's what Judaism was. So we're in this culture shift and we're in a power shift. And does anybody want to try to speculate on the power? What is that power shift that we're looking at in these texts that we're about to look at? We understand the culture shift in a way is just like Judaism just is never going to look like animal sacrifice again. It's never going to be centered on one building again. But what's the power shift that's happening simultaneously? Can we go to community view, Bobby, so I can see if somebody wants to say something? Anybody want to comment on, think about the power structure that led sacrifices in the temple? Okay, Ed, great. You can unmute.
Yeah, Rabbi, something you taught us before in the beginning verse of the Pirkei Avot, the succession, that it's very interesting. The succession goes directly from the prophets to the men of the Sanhedrin, of the great assembly. And it doesn't go to the priests from the
That's
prophets.
right. In that very first text of Mishnah that we looked at, number 1 on your source sheet, we notice the chain of transmission that's just being routinely stated there. But actually, there's a pretty glaring omission from the chain of transmission, and Ed put his finger on it. Where are the priests? In fact, they had been the powerful leaders of Judaism for 1,000 years, and they're not in this. And they no longer have a power base because there's no temple. No one's feeding them literally with those sacrifices. That's how they ate, was they got a portion of the food that was brought in honor of God. Everybody else had their own land. So there is a power shift from the priests to rabbis. And rabbis are not running a building, they're not running sacrifices. You know, they're teaching people. They're basically, studying, learning, trying to kind of figure out how can we live, like what should be the community practices. So we're in a power shift, we're in a culture shift, and we're going to see all that reflected in our texts. In fact, our texts look on the surface like just kind of lovely teachings that are wise. But there's also a certain polemic in them that has to do with this power and culture shift. And we're going to be looking at that. So let us start. And I'm going to be asking also, what speaks to you here? We're going to have some discussion here. Let's start with the very last reading from Ben Bagbag about turning it over and over, probably meaning the words of Torah. Bobby, I guess we could screen share that last text now so everybody can see it in front of you. Many of you probably have it pulled up. I do too. While Bobby's pulling it up, I'm just going to read it out loud here. Ben Bagbag says, turn it over. Turn it over and turn it over, since everything is in it, and look deeply into it, and grow old and gray over it, and do not budge from it, since you can have no better allotment than it. And they are sure he's talking about Torah, because what else would you be turning over and over and over? So did everybody get to see that there? And is that as big as it can be, Bobby? Because I know it's hard to see these things when they're screen shared. But anyway, it's basically turn it over and over and spend your whole life till you're old and gray. This is the priority. Don't budge from it. There's nothing better than this. Okay, let's go back to me now. And soon we're going to go to community view because I'm going to ask, what are we seeing promoted here, and therefore what's not even being mentioned and demoted as the nature of Judaism, the way we should be Jewish? And what does it mean to turn it over and over? Let's look at our community view and see who would like to ponder upon that. Bobby.
So to me, it speaks of, instead of being told by a priest, a rabbi, everything and accepting it and doing what they say, it's inviting us as individuals to study Torah, to get out of it what we can.
It's beautiful. It's really in some way a democratization of, everybody can be involved in this. There can be lots of different perspectives on it. Turn it over and over. That's what learning is about. And if you think about the sacred cycle of our year, we do come back to the exact same Torah text every single year. we come back to the same holy day texts every single year. So it's like they're basically saying this is an unending wisdom source. It's not just study it once and you're done with it, and now you can go back and build a temple. This is the work. Louisa, you can unmute.
Hang on a minute. So what I found interesting was one says to build a fence around the Torah. One says to build a box around, or put it in a box and stand, not necessarily put it in a box, but stand on it. And the other one says to read it over and over again. So what I find interesting compared to today's world is technically we do keep it in a box, and we use the doors or the curtains to keep a fence around it.
Uh-huh. Okay, very interesting. We're going to talk more about what that fence around the Torah means. Does anybody else want to comment on Bog before we move on here? Okay, well, yes, Phil.
I just wanted to mention that there's a similar thing in the Christian world with the Reformation, where you didn't have to go through the priest anymore to talk to God. You had to figure out for yourself what that meant, and even respond to the inner light, the inner voice.
That's right. And because
But that was much later.
That was later. That was, I guess, by the 1500s happening, and a huge movement in Christianity, and that's why Protestants don't have a pope. And this is why Jews don't have a high priest now. I mean, we have sort of honorary positions, like I think there's a high priest of England and a high priest of Israel, but it's not the same thing. It's not like a pope who, Paul.
Well, I just have a question. Were the Jews rebelling against the synagogue that you made this sacrifices to? Is that why this was transitioning? Because it's such a major shift from what it was to much more centralized, less centralized, to community, to study this document over and over and change the way we function. Because as Jews, so were people dissatisfied? Were they unhappy? Did they not want to support the Cohen? It was the Kohanim, right? That in the Yes.
Yeah,
so
really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. So if we look back to what was happening around 70 CE when the Second Temple started, the old ways were already kind of crumbling. The Jews were very divided. I talked in an earlier class about the divisions within the Jewish community. So everybody was at each other's throat in these factions. They didn't get along. They had different ideas. And basically the Romans then were knocking down the temple and dispersing people, which also meant there was a huge economic upheaval. So the old ways are crumbling, and we kind of see that happening today, where the way of life around the world has been pretty unsustainable, just infinite growth. The world as a market is unsustainable. People aren't getting their needs met. And so something's going to emerge. We don't really know what yet. We're in that middle place where the old ways are crumbling, the new ways haven't been born yet, but it's a real time of turbulence. And that's the kind of time they were in as the temple crashed and the leaders no longer had an economic base. And these new ideas and ways were rising up. So it's like all of the above. Yeah, but really good question. I don't know whether it's Phyllis or Natan, but there's a hand up in the box. Okay, Natan.
Okay, so in a different source, there is a context that is interesting, which is that later on in the Talmud, Ben Bakbak is known to be a convert, but he is credited to be the Gentile, the non-Jew, who demanded that Hillel teach them the entire Torah while standing in one foot.
That was
So that association means that having gone to trying to see everything while standing in one foot to spending a lifetime trying to understand it, I think gives it a different context.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe that was a softball question to Hillel so that Hillel would say something like, the essence of it all is love your neighbor as yourself or whatever, which is what he said. So something along those lines. Yeah, so, well, these rabbis are trying to extract some guiding values, practices. Like they are interested in Jewish cohesion and survival, but they also want everybody to engage with it. So it's kind of a both and, I think. As we, yeah. So really interesting. Okay, so now let us go to, let me look at my next one here. Oops. We are going to go to let's go to the second to last one now. Oh, actually, let's go to Ben Zoma, number 4-1. Let's go to Ben Zoma. That's going to be our next one. So does everybody see that? That's Pirkei Avot 4-1. Ben Zoma says, "Who is the wise one? The one who learns from everyone. Who is the mighty one? The one who conquers their raw desire. Who is the rich one? The one who is happy with their lot. Who is the honored one? The one who honors the created beings." And the footnote says that means people. So what's Ben Zoma doing here to instill this power and culture shift? We can come back to me. Or actually, let's go to community view so I can see people. What's the value, again, being instilled here? This is all part of a collective culture shift and power shift. So what's Ben Zoma setting up here as kind of a value in the Jewish community?
Democratization.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching and learning.
Mm-hmm.
So right. So again, like really reinforcing, this is about learning. This is about understanding. It's not about bringing your best products to feed priests. And taking it home, I just wanted to ask maybe 3 people here to speak for a couple minutes about somebody who has been a teacher to you. Not necessarily that they were a teacher who was paid to be a teacher, but somebody who you really felt you learned from, you were mentored by. And how did you and that person connect? Like, how did that happen? Because in many ways, that's the teaching about like what it means to be Jewish, is to be a learner here. Find your teacher. Anybody have a story personally of a teacher that was important to you? Paul. And then Susan Milton.
It's interesting. I was just telling this to Phil maybe this morning, and my father was just not overt, and he didn't really have a strong voice to teach me about life lessons. He showed me sometimes, but my uncle and my aunt, my uncle Isidore was much older, very wise. He was a lawyer in the Hamptons area, and they came out to Arizona every winter as they were retired, and so where I lived, and we would just sit together, and he would really give me so many interesting pieces of information about life. I remember he even said he had money. He said, "I'd pay a stockbroker to lose my money," but he would tell me about how to invest. He even bought me some stock. So he really took an incredible interest, and he has such a place in my heart because I think it wasn't intangible. He really said things very wise that were really useful to me. And instead of resenting my father, I just elevated my uncle and aunt because they saw me and they saw that I was curious and interested, and they gave me things to read. They shared articles and stories that were a lot of Jewish stuff too. They really were very active in their synagogue back in New York, and they came to Arizona every year and would go to Torah luncheons and all these things. And so I will never forget that. This is someone who I had such a strong place in my heart because he wanted me to know and learn and grow. And maybe my father did, but I didn't get it. So
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay. Susan Milner and then Susan Thompson.
Well, my most profound person of influence in my life from the age of 5.5 just passed last Saturday. And so at the age of 97,
Wow.
and I'm blessed, so blessed to have had her as my neighbor, my surrogate mother, surrogate parent, my very much my mentor in the terms of being a role model. And I feel that my entire being, not to exclude my parents' influence, but this person, Marge, was such a profound presence in living her values, specifically around civil rights, housing, basic needs, childcare, whatever the predominant needs of the community were, she was there as an activist in such a dramatic way. She started organizations. She led organizations at a local and regional and even state level. Started a erasing racism.
You had her for many years. What a length of days.
Yes, and she really lived the values, democratic values, a few small d and large d, and had present for me in her backyard were people of all colors and backgrounds. And it was literally showing me the way of how to live in a truly integrated way, values and practice. But happened to have been, she and her husband are both atheists. So I didn't get any religious, like the opposite, or she never said anything. They never said anything in my memory that was to contradict my being involved in Reform Judaism or being bat mitzvahed and graduated and all that. But it's, to me, to this day, it's, who lives those values, who is a role model by practicing what they may be preaching.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. And Susan Thompson will be our last one for now.
Okay. My person was my fourth grade teacher in New York City, Mr. Baum. I remember him. And I didn't have him for 97 years or whatever, just for 1 year. In fourth grade, I had to move from Buffalo, where I was living with my divorced mother, and my father lived in that town too. And I had to go to my grandparents' home in New York City and live with them for a while. So I was going to a new school from a very different environment. In Buffalo, it was kind of it's just a smaller environment. And then I'm coming to New York City to a class that I don't know, to grandparents that speak German. And they're not that integrated into an English speaking tradition or neighbors and so on. And mostly everything was German. And I was very shy and inwardly drawn. And this teacher, this man, showed me what compassion was, what the power of learning was, the power of believing in yourself, because he believed in me so much and kept encouraging me. I was a good learner and I could read well, etc. So he would put me forth in the classroom, not just to brag about me or anything like that, but to let me find places that I would shine and feel comfortable. And if kids would mock me or bully me and so on, he handled it very well, um, usually privately, until the point that I really felt confident, somewhat confident in myself. And I think that formed the basis of me wanting to be a teacher. I felt like my life really changed because this man believed in me and caused a change in the classroom atmosphere too. And I think I embraced that compassion and that kindness.
Thank you. So when we listen to these stories, I know, I've even had an experience of like someone saying a sentence to me that would felt like such mentoring of me. So from a sentence to a year to a lifetime, these teachers are like hugely meaningful people. And I think it's important to think of ourselves also on the other end of that. Like, who do you see? Who do you say a sentence or really invest in over a year or a lifetime. And even if it isn't immediately fruitful, you're offering yourself as a sort of teacher. I mean, not necessarily that you're a preacher teacher, but just as a way of life, as a relationship, as somebody who believes in somebody else. And that's the essence of this kind of generational transmission. So that's what we've got from Benzoma. So really beautiful, and taking it to heart, something we can all live into, and especially at many of our stages of life now, from the mentoring, investing end of, kind of, I just had a really experience that was so meaningful to me. I was at this, it was actually a climate justice type gathering about what do we do about the moment, meeting the moment. But this young 28-year-old national leader of the Sunrise Movement, the kids who do great work, was sitting across from me, and she just started weeping, and she said, "I'm just so moved to be sitting across from a movement elder." And I was like, oh,
Ah,
wow. Like my role at this stage of life is to invest in these amazing young people, with care and teaching and mentoring and training, whatever. But and to encourage people in our generation, the elders, to take ourselves seriously as those kind of almost ancestors. Like we've all had people who were our either ancestors who are no longer alive or the generation that came before and saw us and believed in us. But we are it now. I think everybody in this room is it now. Like we are that generation that gets to sort of see um, and give to, whether it's a biological person or a neighbor or whatever. But what's sort of the generation that you're giving yourself as a infuser to? And that's Benzoma there. That's the wise one. And I think it's wise in both directions, the one who's the giver and the one who's the receiver. And then there's one little piece in Benzoma here, who is the mighty one, the one who conquers their raw desire. So it's about everybody taking your own responsibility for our own sort of self-management. Like the mighty one is not someone who has an army or who can go bomb someone. It's like the mighty one is, can we sort of find our human grounding and our kind of spiritual best selves and sustain that? And that's something also all of us can do. So that's Benzoma's Mishna there. And now we will go to 517. Let us see, 517, where are you? I will read it to us. This is a really important one. Every difference of opinion or controversy that is for the sake of heaven will in the end endure, or God will be okay with it. But one that is not for the sake of heaven will not in the end endure. What is a controversy that is for the sake of heaven? Well, an example is the controversy between Hillel and Shammai. They really disagreed with each other, but they got along. They stayed in the same community. And what's a controversy that's not for the sake of heaven? The controversy of Korach and all of his congregation. And the part we're really going to look at is what does it mean to have a controversy for the sake of heaven? Let's go back to me for a minute. So this is a great Hebrew phrase to learn. Machlochet b'shem shamayim. A controversy is a machlochet b'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. You can hear shamayim, heaven. Machlochet b'shem shamayim. If you want to just say it a few times, lodge it in deep. Machlochet b'shem shamayim. Machlochet b'shem shamayim.
Hashem Shemayim.
Machlochet b'shem shamayim. Literally, the first lesson I ever had in rabbinical school was they taught this concept, machlochet b'shem shamayim. I was a brand new rabbinical student. And we learned about machlochet b'shem shamayim, like that concept in Judaism. Now, there's a lot of questions, like what makes it a controversy for the sake of heaven, as opposed to some other kind of controversy? How do you figure that out? But also to see the disagreements that we are having now on the world stage within the Jewish community and beyond, as is there a way to see these as everybody with their best intentions doing the best they can and really coming from different experiences, different understandings, different pain, but doing it for the sake of heaven, not trying to do something that's intentionally nasty or destructive or whatever. So I think the concept of machloket b'shem shamayim is so important. It's really, really hard to keep communities together. And if you look at human history, basically the history of humans is both the dynamic of human communities survive better when people are altruistic, care for each other, are social. That's a good indicator of who's going to survive. But also communities fracture and shatter and break off into tribal units and start wars and create new denominations because they can't stay in the original one because people don't agree. So there's a both and dynamic there. And this is an encouragement to hang in there and stick together, even if you don't agree, as long as it's somehow for the sake of heaven. We can talk about what that means. So let's go to community view. And how do you take this concept of machlochet b'shem shamayim? Who would like to reflect on that? And just to bring it home for right this minute, when we look at the Jewish community, it's just so split right now over what's happening in Gaza. Really, really divided in painful ways. It's dividing families. It's dividing synagogues. It's so hard to be a Jewish leader of lots of kinds of communities or rabbinical schools or whatever right now. And I just hear from it from everybody, from parents, grandparents, everybody's struggling with how do we be in this together when we really disagree? And we're tuned into really different pieces of the pain and the history. We don't even sometimes share the same narrative of what truth is, even though everybody has pieces of it. So is this a machlochet b'shem shamayim? Is it a disagreement for the sake of heaven, of like really trying to get it right, being our best selves, turning towards each other in a really difficult time? What do you think? Machlochet b'shem shamayim.
Can I be heard?
Yes, Joanne, you're on.
Well, I think one example might be on a congregational basis. I've just had an insight listening to you that I think in BZBI, they refused to have a specific response to which side they were going to be on. And at first I thought, well, that's stupid. And now I'm realizing I think it was for the sake of cohesion to keep the shul from fracturing.
Yeah. And there's a huge value in keeping a community together.
Well, but I think the idea was to keep a war from happening within the shul.
There's a real tension because there is a huge value in keeping a community together, and there's also a huge value in taking bold moral stances for action and commitment. That's also, so it's a really hard time to be in Jewish leadership in different spaces, especially in a very divided community. Bobby.
Yeah, so in terms of the Israel-Palestine situation, I'm having trouble agreeing that that conflict is for the sake of heaven or the sake of God, um, only because it just seems so wrong. But in general, I would say that controversies around that I would kind of define it as for the good of the bigger picture, for the good of everyone, if that
Like
makes.
everyone in humanity or in a Jewish community, or what's your set there?
Well, I think it depends on the situation, but no, I would say for the good of um humanity, or for the good of something bigger than just our community, our synagogue, our, whatever, something bigger than that. And really, for many years, we at Lev Hayir did the same as BZBI. We didn't say we as a synagogue, and actually we still do it. We don't say we as a synagogue are for this or for that. And well, we don't have a building, but we don't put up signs saying, we stand with Israel. That's a whole nother subject. But we don't do that, although in recent years we have been a little more vocal about our views, not as an institution, but as people.
Yeah, we haven't taken institutional positions, and I don't think we necessarily need to take an institutional position.
Right.
But what makes something b'shem shemayim, for the sake of heaven? What makes a disagreement sort of a God endorsed, Jewishly endorsed, kind of honest struggle between very different, voices? And what's outside the pale? So we've kind of seen this on different issues in the Jewish community. Like for a while, it was gay and lesbian leadership. Gay and lesbian leadership was considered like, it wasn't like for the sake of heaven, according to some people, and then it was for the sake of heaven, according to the people who were being excluded. And eventually, that was a machloket, a disagreement that actually kind of got resolved in a lot of parts of the Jewish community, not all, in a very rewarding, good way. But it was kind of a long journey where the argument was actually over whether or not this is destroying the Jewish community so that it's not for the sake of heaven, or whether it's an honest disagreement within the Jewish community about who should be leaders and what a family looks like and those kind of things, who should belong. And yeah, Ed.
Yeah, I don't want to sound facetious, but I think the last pope governed the Catholic Church b'shem shemayim.
Say more about that.
Well, for example, he didn't make any doctrinal statements, but quite famously, he said, "Who am I to judge people who are homosexual?" I think his posture was not to exclude, but to include people of all sorts, and I think it was a disposition to controversy that was what we call b'shem shemayim.
I think that's really interesting because he tried to move things forward, not by abandoning anybody, but by moving everybody forward. So he couldn't alienate basically the right-wing conservative church too much, but wanted to have an inclusive and respectful church. So yeah, that's dancing that kind of tightrope, right? Of like, it's probably not fast enough change for a lot of people. On the other hand, you're not like leaving out the people you're also trying to move along. And is there a moment when you need to leave out the other people? And that really being a leader doesn't mean just continuing to include everybody, including people who are racist or, bigoted or whatever, like actively and harmfully. So, Phil.
This is reminding me of the saying that I've always believed in. There's room in my world for you if there's room in your world for me.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I've always had a negative thing about the ACLU allowing the Nazis to march officially. I mean, of course, they couldn't do anything about it, but to officially acknowledge them, to me, it was abandoning people. And today's government, the same thing, I think about it. There's no room in whatever negotiations or so-called negotiations might happen between your point of view and mine if your point of view excludes me.
Yeah.
By definition. So I have a different view on that, and that to me is not acceptable in the eyes of God, but that's just me speaking.
Yeah, really interesting, Phil. And that's reminding me back in the days when most Jewish communities would not include women in a minyan. Me and my friends had a practice of we won't count you in a minyan unless you'll count me. So even if there were like 9, whatever the count was, like we only would count the people who also would count us. So yeah, I mean, these things are, there's not like just a algorithm for what the answers are. And that's part of the machloket b'shem shamayim, is how do we even wend our way towards being human together through all these situations and issues? And, it's complicated. So,
Rabbi Julie?
Yes. Is that Joe?
Yeah, I have something I'd like to say.
Please.
I've read this a lot recently. This person who, I'm just trying to think of his name, but it was like he would say, well, first they came after these people.
Yeah. The Reverend.
And then yeah. And then it was like, and then when I was the only one left and there was nobody to speak for me.
Yeah.
And I just think that, and I just kind of, I'm thinking of a couple other thoughts too. The rabbi who was talking about life is a narrow bridge.
Uh-huh.
And it's trying to help other people get across, like trying to help as many people get across, everybody as possible get across. And then I'm also thinking about that other rabbi who said, if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? And I just think that in these times, whatever it is, global warming, not enough money for kids to have a good education, wars going on all over the place in the world, Gaza, Ukraine, and there's other places, Yemen, and there's other places in Africa. I don't know them all, but it's like, I feel if people feel moved to speak on a particular issue, then that's in the, whatever that phrase was, in the how you phrased it, in the pursuit of heaven. That if people feel moved to give their heartfelt opinion on a particular topic, then that's for the sake of heaven.
Thank you, Joe. I think a lot of times when there's a lot of contention, it's because two worthwhile values are interacting, but they're in a polarized way where some of the people are holding only one value, some of the people are holding others. So there is, a lot of times where we see pushback, especially from the younger generation against sort of mainstream Jewish institutions, because the younger generation of Jews is holding a really important Jewish value of that everyone's made in God's image, everyone should be equal, and nobody should be starved or bombed. But the mainstream Jewish community is also holding a really important value, which is, it's the scary world. Jews have been through a lot. Jews need to be safe. We need to ensure that. We're trying to keep this community together, and we have to exclude other voices. So the values polarize, and it's not like either value is wrong because they're both right. I think of it sort of as like some people are aligning more around sort of freedom and equality, and other people are aligning more around safety and security. And actually, you need both, and both are dependent on each other. It's just like nobody has a real blueprint for how to land there. But so anyway, in polarized situations, it's usually because there are equally worthwhile values that are at the core of something. And if you can have a bird's eye view and hold the whole, which is hard for people to do, maybe there can be some movement there. Let's hope for the best. Anyway, I want to move on. I threw in one other quote here that's sort of not quite on this topic of teachers and learners, but I just think it's a nice one. It's the one about the jug being half full here. So let's just take a look at that. And then let's see here. And then I'm going to ask, especially if anybody who hasn't spoken yet wants to talk about which of these last four quotes are you most drawn to and why, what speaks to you. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. He was the rabbi who compiled the Mishna in about 200 CE. So he's called Judah the Prince, Judah Hanassi. And it was an oral tradition until he made sure it was all written down. And this was some of his wisdom. Do not look at the jug, but rather at what is in it. For there are new jugs full of old wine and old ones that do not even have new within them. So we have a saying in English, as you know, that's somewhat similar to that. Let's go to community view. And does somebody want to say our saying here? Don't look at the outside of the jug because you can't really tell what's inside it. What do we say in English that's very similar to that?
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, don't judge a book by its cover. Same idea. Always good. And, I guess it's kind of connected to this idea of be a teacher, be a learner, because it's easy to just dismiss people and not interact with them if you're just judging the outside. And if you go deeper with more empathy, you probably can learn and you probably can teach every other human being. In other words, be human with other humans. So anyway, that's those. Okay, so if I'm going to look for hands, especially of anybody who hasn't spoken yet, to say which of these quotes spoke to you and why. If there's anybody who hasn't had a chance to comment yet. Anne, you can unmute.
There we go. Failed it, but the ones about honoring and teaching and passing it along, I didn't get a chance to talk earlier, but I was thinking they all kind of merge together. It's an idea of your responsibility. It's not to fix everything, is to figure out where you belong in this and what are you going to do with it. And when you turn the pages of Torah, who you were when you were 13 is very different from who you are when you're 70, or it should be. So what you see changes. And as that changes, you should be changing too, and for the better. Not getting stuck in, well, I said to my son once, if you ever hear me say, well, when I was your age, you have my permission to just kind of. I think I think what keeps our lives going as Jews is to keep passing it along. I think that's the door to door is just, to me, the most sacred of our responsibilities. And to be able to turn it and then say, here, it's your book now. You turn it.
That's great. Yeah, and different generations have different insights about the same heritage. And so it's to keep listening generationally. Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Anybody else want to tell us what you were drawn to, especially someone who hasn't spoken yet? Okay, anybody who has spoken, we'll take a last person here, if there is one. Okay, Susan Milner.
Yeah, I think for me, even though I agree that they all kind of blended together in many ways and were compelling, I think the most compelling is that you're not required to finish a job, but you are required to do something.
Why does that speak to you right now in your life?
I think because of, was it Joan Baez, I guess, who was credited with the only antidote for despair is action. And I felt every second of every moment that I'm not tuning out the world through being plugged into audiobooks or activities or whatever. I'm despairing, and I know that I have to do something to counteract that, how to repair the world, the Tikkun Olam mission of how do I make things better. It's not by wallowing in the horrendousness of where we are as a country, nation, world.
Nice. Yeah. And Bobby will be our last one there with an E.
Oh, I was thinking about Martin Luther King's speech about, I have a dream. And it was very much like that, where he may not get there. Moses didn't make it to the promised land, but in other words, doing their part to advance it. Heard many speakers who were speaking that voice, even our Senator Cory Booker, and talking about good trouble with John Lewis, and all of these things feel so much like being in the flow of doing what we can, speak the truth, and not be concerned that we can finish the job, but do what we can to advance God's beautiful vision for what can be on our planet.
Yeah. Yeah, a takeaway I have from these is there's not exactly a right answer. Like the Torah and these rabbis do not say, go do this. This is the right thing. It's a process. It's like be human to the best of your ability. Try your best, make your offering, do your lifelong learning. It's a process thing. And as people have said, from generation to generation, it's not just one generation. It's like this is going to evolve. And in reconstructing Judaism, we bring the particular take on this. We're an evolving religious civilization, and we do it in community. That's how we evolve. It's not somebody sitting alone in your room studying and trying to figure out the answers and doing the best you can. We're in it together. So it's interactive, it's shared learning, it's learning from each other and with each other, it's lifelong learning, and it's generational. So we're not going to be the make or break it, figure it all out. That's the answer. There isn't an answer. You're going to keep turning and turning it again and again and again in every generation. On the other hand, it's also, it's like we will learn and we will do is what we said at Sinai. We said, Naaseh v'nishma. We actually, Naaseh v'nishma. We will do and we will learn. It's both and, it's dialectical. So we're learning and we're doing and we're learning. It's not like just sit in your monk's cell and study. It's like we're going to be what sort of the concept of Joan Baez just was mentioned of active hope. we're going to take a stand, whatever we can figure out is the best thing in that moment, sort of in relationship with other human beings. And we're going to act, and we're going to learn, and we're going to act, and we're going to learn, and we're going to act. So we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to do it in the spirit of connection and humanity and community. And that's sort of that is the Jewish path. And particularly it's the reconstructing Judaism path of build strong communities, because we hold each other as we do this work of figuring it out. So that's, I think that's what speaks to me about all that. And now we are going to go into some of our own familial wisdom sayings here. If anybody was in Shemanu when Joanne led the session on more sharing about these, and you learned something from someone else that you liked and want to lift up here, I'm open to hearing it. And while people think of that, I will say a couple from my family. And just to give you the outline of what we're going to do, we're going to share these things. We're going to count the Omer together. We're going to sing our Torah learning song, and then we're going to say goodbye on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. The sun is shining. So I will share a couple that I thought up from my family. My mother, who had 5 children, always said, more love is born with each baby. And I love that teaching because it was to keep the kids from just being jealous when there was one more. What she didn't say was more time, more money, that's not what's born. But she said more love is born with each baby. And that was very beautiful. Also, in my teenage years, a big bumper sticker and button was today is the first day of the rest of your life, which I think was a really good teaching. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. It's a new day. It hasn't happened before. Make your choices, make the best of it. And then one more my mother taught was in this house full of 5 little children, she would say the game has to be fun for both people. So I was the bossy big sister of 4 little siblings, and especially I got that teaching. The game has to be fun for both people. It can't just be a game you invent that you're going to win by definition. So I really learned from that how to be more of a, kind of community peer. And that was a good teaching. So let's go back to community view and let's hear from other people. So either another saying from your own background or something you learned from Joanne's Shemanu session from somebody else. If people can remember 2 Wednesdays ago. Bobby?
Yeah, so this kind of mirrors what you said about today's the first day of the rest of your life. There's a song, it's not that old, but it is a few years old, by a British woman, Natasha Bedingfield, called Unwritten. And this song so speaks to me because it talks about seek your inner vision and open the window and let things in, and the rest of your life is still unwritten. And I just love the song and I love the thought. And I was at a wedding last summer, and even though this song is, I don't know, this song has to be 5 or 7, maybe 10 years old, I don't know, they played that song at the wedding. And all of the younger generation, my cousin's kids, young, were so into this song. And I was shocked because I figured, oh, this is an oldie, it's an older song. And I just loved it. But that's really meaningful to me. The rest is still unwritten.
I love that. And that also tells us that a lot of times Torah can come from songs. There's a lot of Torah in like folk music and country music and music that has English lyrics that we can take to heart. So that's a great source of Torah. Torah meaning learning, spiritually meaningful wisdom. So great. Thank you, Bobby. And anybody else want to lift up a wisdom quote?
I do.
Great.
Um, I remember being impressed with a lot of what I was hearing from other people, but I can't, and I really should have written it down. I can't remember specifics, but the specific of my own history was my grandmother quoting Shakespeare and saying that things without remedy shall be without regard. In other words, some things are not fixable. Typically, that's medical stuff, but some things are not fixable, and obsessing about them isn't going to work. They should just be left. And that still impresses me because as we get older, many of us get new things that aren't going to be fixed. And it has to be okay. And we have to be willing to go on with our lives and march into what's unwritten.
Joanne, that's really powerful. And that brings us full circle to the quote, the wisdom quote I opened with, which was the serenity prayer of teach us to accept what, we must accept, teach us to change what can be changed, and help us to find the wisdom to discern which is which. So yeah, I mean, in some ways, to me, that's the greatest wisdom quote ever said. But yeah, so and anybody else want to offer one up? And then we're going to move into our Omer. We got any more wisdom in the room? Oh, good, Todd. Wait, Todd, you're still on mute. There you go. There you go.
I just wanted to quote by the Beatles. All you need is love is one of them, and the other one is whatever gets you through the night is all right by John Lennon.
Oh, beautiful.
Could you repeat it?
All you need is love by the Beatles, and the other one is whatever gets you through the night is all right by John Lennon.
Wow.
Wow.
Bill?
I just thought of one. The greatest wisdom is to say, I don't know.
That's a good one. Evie, you got one for us? Evie just soaking it all up? I bet you have a few of your own. Karen Zeitz, do you have a wisdom quote that lives in you? Okay. Well, we are going to move on to the Omer, and we are on the, I guess, 36th day, but there's also tonight, which will start the new day. So we'll count it, I guess we'll count it as the day one of week 6 for the day that we're on. And if anybody wants to stand up in body or in spirit for this, that is traditionally how it's done. I'm going to sit so that I'm still on the screen. And we are going to be counting the Omer with the same as the candle lighting blessing, except it will be L'saper. No, how do we end this one?
Al-Sfirat.
Al-Sfirat HaOmer. Okay, so and then we will count and we will talk about the mystical qualities. Okay, so Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer. Today is the 36th day of the Omer, day 1 of week 6. And this is about it's the Gevura of Chesed. So we're in the week of Gevura, of strength, but we're in Yesod, actually, Gevura of Yesod. And Yesod, when the Amish, sort of the the emanations of the mystical God come down into presence in our lives. You can map the flow onto the human body. And when you map that flow of what's what, like Chesed and Gevurah, onto the human body, Yesod is the genitals. It's a very generative, integrative part of the Sfirot, of these emanations, because it pulls everything together from the left side and the right side in unity, creates a foundation. Yesod literally means foundation, and it's considered generative. And Gevurah for the whole week is about justice, rigor, containers. So we've got the Gevurah of Yesod. And again, I think about how we've got, we have to create the structures for the flow to take place, that generative flow of relationship and care and love. It happens because there's a structure. It also happens spontaneously, but it's helpful to have, like, I'm thinking about this community that's a structured space where we know when there are people in need, we know when we'll come together, we know when, what will kind of hold us as a community, things like Shabbat, the rhythm of Shabbat, the rhythm of the sacred cycle of the year. So that's where we are, and we are basically thanking the universe for the privilege of counting this spiritual ascent between slavery and standing at Sinai in freedom. I think we have some announcements from Bobby and then our song.
Of course. So we've got a few things coming up as we kind of wind down. Let me just... Okay. So as we wind down for the end of our year, we of course have Shemana will continue every week. We will have a Shabbat morning service the first Saturday morning in June, led by Michael. June 1st, we have our annual meeting. If you have not yet registered, please do. And before that, May 27th, we have our book discussion on Waking Lions, which is proving, I had to slug my way through the beginning and now I'm kind of into it, so it's worth sticking with. I hope I'm not forgetting anything because I'm not looking at the calendar at the moment, but I think that pretty much does it. Evie, oh yes, we have Rosh Chodesh on May 28th. I always have to look to Evie because she keeps me honest about things I forget. And I think that's it. So thank you all. This was a great series. Evie?
Home Shabbat in my apartment, and I need you to tell me that you're coming and what you're bringing.
Thank you. And we thank Evie for doing that. For those of you who may be new to our community, pre-pandemic, we used to have home Shabbats once a month where we would get together on a Friday evening and have a short service, lay-led, and a potluck dinner. And it was lovely and people really liked them. Then, of course, we had to stop it. And now we're trying to get back into them. So also, if you want to host a home Shabbat, it's a lovely thing to do. It's not a tremendous amount of work. Let, I guess, Evie know or let me know. And we would love to do that, even if it's through the summer. That would be a lovely way for people to get together.
And they're potlucks, so you don't have to cook for people.
Right. You don't have to cook. You can buy something and bring it. People do that. But it is a really nice way to get together. So thank you all. I'm not going to say have a great summer because I'm going to see you on June 1st for sure.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you for your tech support, Bobby, as usual, and for everything else as usual. And I'm going to say one last thing before we move into our closing song, which is this on a much smaller scale, not the same scale as the destruction of the temple and the reinvention of Judaism, but on a much smaller scale, we are also going through a culture shift that's kind of a democratization in this community, which our exec and Bobby and me are leading, so that no, it's not just one person who holds everything and everything's on their plate and carrying all the burdens, but it's really much more spread out so that anyone who's in any leadership hopefully, is having apprentices kind of rise up into those same roles. And we're all kind of sharing the tasks and the creation of this community in a more inclusive way. So we're really, the leadership of the community is really thinking about how to live into that more in the next year, and have it's a real culture shift in a way, because we come to rely on amazing leaders, and then, you know, we need to expand beyond that and have more people share that. Really the joy of co-creating the community. So we're trying to support people in doing that, and also support the ones who are already doing it in sharing it, you know, so that more people can have those roles. So little culture shift nestled into a big learning about a big culture shift, the reinvention of Judaism. And now for our song, and then I hope everybody gets to go outside, because it just looks like an incredible day outside. Okay. For our teachers and our students and the students of our students, we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. Goodbye, and thank you for being here, everyone. If anyone has feedback, as usual, on our series, you know where to find me. You know where to find Diane, the head of our education committee.
Thank you, Rabbi Julie. This was really fun, I'll say. A really, really good series. And
Yes.
Andrea, if you're there, if you don't mind telling me what the photo is that you have on your Zoom screen, I would love to know. Hi.
Oh, it's just something from the internet.
Oh, okay.
It's nothing it's actually something in Binghamton, but it's not
Oh, really?
about me. It was just a thing I
Okay.
put.
No, it's interesting because I was just in Scotland then, and it reminds me of a couple
Hello?
of castles. Oh, there goes my internet.
Goodbye, everybody.
Oh, I thought,
Thank you.
thank you. This was wonderful, I could say. Thank you
Glad you enjoyed it.
very much.
Everybody have a good day.